What if your heart is already changing before you even realize you've started walking? Not after a week of commitment, not after hitting some milestone on a fitness app, but within the first few minutes of that quiet, almost unremarkable decision to get up and move. Most people dismiss walking. They see it as the consolation prize of exercise, which you do when you're too tired, too old, or too out of shape for something real. But here's what the science keeps showing over and over in studies that track thousands of people across years and decades. Walking is one of the most powerful things a human body can do for its heart, and the moment it starts working isn't when you think. Picture this. You're sitting on your couch, phone in hand, doing nothing in particular. Something nudges you, maybe guilt, maybe boredom, maybe a video you watched, and you stand up and head outside. That moment, right there, is more significant to your cardiovascular system than it looks from the outside, because the second your muscles start moving, they start demanding more oxygen, and your heart, which has been sitting in quiet cruise control, suddenly gets the message. Things are changing. Time to respond. It doesn't panic. It doesn't overreact. It does something far more impressive. It orchestrates. Blood vessels in your legs dilate. Your heart rate climbs in an organized, calibrated way. Your nervous system adjusts blood pressure almost in real time, like a conductor bringing the orchestra up to tempo without letting anyone rush ahead. What looks like a stroll to the mailbox is, from your cardiovascular system's perspective, a full internal mobilization. And this is where most explanations stop. They tell you walking is good for your heart, pat you on the back, and send you on your way. But they don't tell you the part that actually changes how you think about every single walk you take. There is a threshold, a point where the walk stops being just movement and starts being medicine. Not a dramatic cliff edge, but a real, physiologically meaningful shift where your body stops simply reacting to the effort and starts registering it as a signal worth learning from. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this conversation. Here's what's happening in those first few minutes that most people write off as just warming up. Your sympathetic nervous system, the same one that fires during stress, activates in a measured way, sending signals that increase your heart rate and redirect blood toward the muscles doing the work. This isn't harmful. This is exactly what it's supposed to do. At the same time, nitric oxide is released from the inner lining of your blood vessels, causing them to relax and widen. This reduces resistance, makes it easier for blood to flow, and delivers oxygen more efficiently to every working muscle. Carbon dioxide gets cleared, heat gets managed, the whole system hums louder but in harmony. And underneath all of this, your metabolism shifts. You start burning more glucose. Fat begins to be mobilized as fuel. Visceral fat, the dangerous kind that wraps around your organs and quietly drives inflammation, is particularly sensitive to this kind of steady, moderate movement. So even before you've broken a real sweat, your body is already doing something meaningful. But here's the trap that keeps millions of people from ever crossing into real heart benefit. They feel the discomfort of those first minutes, the slight breathlessness, the heart beating a little faster than they're used to, the legs feeling heavier than expected, and they stop. They interpret that sensation as a warning sign when it's actually an adaptation signal. It's your body saying, yes, this is new, give me a moment to adjust. People who always stop here, who walk 2 minutes and call it a day, who get up from their desk only to return 30 seconds later, they stay in the warm-up zone forever. They never let the body tip over into the phase where the cardiovascular system starts building something lasting. So what is that tipping point, practically speaking? Research doesn't give us one single magic minute that works identically for every human being on Earth. Bodies are different, fitness levels vary. But what population studies and cardiovascular research consistently point toward is this. Somewhere in the range of continuous, moderate-intensity walking, the acute effects on blood pressure, vascular tone, and inflammatory markers become meaningfully detectable. The body starts producing responses that, when repeated regularly, add up to real, measurable protection against heart disease. One walk doesn't remodel your cardiovascular system, but one walk done again tomorrow and the day after and 3 times the week after that, that is a completely different story. The intensity of the walk matters just as much as the duration, and this is where a lot of well-meaning advice falls flat. If you're walking so slowly that your body barely registers a difference between that and standing still, the cardiovascular stimulus is probably too weak to drive meaningful adaptation. You're not challenging the system enough to give it a reason to change. On the other end, you don't need to be gasping for breath and white-knuckling through every step. The sweet spot that research keeps pointing back to is what exercise scientists call moderate intensity. And the simplest way to gauge it is the talk test. You can still hold a conversation, but you're aware that you're working. Your breathing is audibly different from rest. There's a mild effort involved. That zone, that feeling, is where the heart receives the clearest signal that something worth adapting to is happening. Now, blood pressure tells a fascinating part of this story that most people never hear. During a walk, your blood pressure rises slightly. This is normal and expected because the heart needs to push blood harder to reach all the working muscles. But what happens after the walk is where things get truly interesting. In many people, blood pressure in the hours following moderate exercise drops below where it was before they started. This is called post-exercise hypotension, and it's one of the primary reasons walking is prescribed to people with high blood pressure before medication is even considered. The arteries, freshly stimulated by increased blood flow and nitric oxide release, are more relaxed, more flexible, more responsive. A pliable artery handles the natural pressure swings of daily life, stress, exertion, even strong emotion, far better than a stiff one. And stiff arteries are one of the most consistent risk factors for heart attacks and strokes. Every walk that gets your heart working at a moderate pace is essentially a flexibility session for your blood vessels, though nobody ever frames it that way. There's also what happens to your heart rate over time, and this is one of the most satisfying markers of cardiovascular progress. When you first start walking regularly, your heart might jump to 110 or 120 beats per minute at a moderate pace. A few weeks in, that same pace might only bring your heart to 95 or 100. The effort feels the same, but your heart is doing less work to deliver the same result. This is cardiac efficiency. It means the heart is pumping more blood per beat rather than simply beating faster to compensate. People who develop this kind of efficiency, and you don't need to be an athlete to develop it, tend to have lower resting heart rates, which is one of the most reliable indicators of cardiovascular health across large population studies. A lower resting heart rate, in practical terms, means your heart is under less constant strain, just keeping you alive through a normal day. One of the most underappreciated effects of regular walking is what it does to the endothelium, the thin, delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. This isn't just structural wallpaper, it's metabolically active tissue that produces compounds regulating blood pressure, preventing clotting, controlling inflammation, and keeping arterial walls smooth and clear. When the endothelium is healthy, it acts as a barrier against the buildup of fatty plaques that can eventually rupture and cause a heart attack. When it's damaged by chronic inflammation, poor diet, smoking, or prolonged inactivity, it becomes a vulnerable surface where problems begin. Walking, through the repeated mechanical stimulus of increased blood flow, keeps the endothelium doing its job. It's maintenance on a system most people don't even know they have. The metabolic dimension deserves more attention than it usually gets. Walking regularly improves insulin sensitivity, which means your cells respond better to insulin and glucose is managed more efficiently. It shifts your cholesterol profile in favorable directions, typically raising HDL, the protective kind, while contributing to reductions in triglycerides. It reduces the circulating inflammatory markers that, when chronically elevated, are strongly linked to cardiovascular disease. None of these changes are dramatic after a single walk, but they accumulate across weeks and months in ways that show up clearly in blood work, in doctor's office measurements, and eventually in reduced disease risk. This is why walking is so frequently highlighted in cardiovascular prevention guidelines that have nothing to do with weight loss. The heart benefits are happening on an entirely separate track from the number on a scale. When it comes to how much walking is enough, most large-scale research and clinical guidelines converge on roughly 150 minutes of moderate-intensity activity per week as a meaningful threshold. The the level at which cardiovascular protection becomes clearly measurable in population data. Many people translate this practically as about 30 minutes of brisk walking on most days of the week. You don't need to hit this every single day without exception. Life doesn't work that way, and the heart isn't keeping a perfect attendance record. What matters is the pattern across the week and across the months. Below this threshold, you're still doing better than nothing, and for someone starting from complete inactivity, even small amounts of walking produce significant relative improvements. But around that 150-minute mark, the signal becomes much clearer. It's where studies consistently start showing reduced rates of cardiovascular events, hospitalizations, and mortality. A question that comes up constantly is whether it's better to walk slowly for a longer time or faster for less time. The honest answer is that pace matters more than most people want to hear. Observational studies following large groups across many years find that people who self-report walking at a brisk pace consistently have lower cardiovascular mortality than those who walk at a leisurely stroll, even when total time walked is similar. This doesn't mean slow walking is worthless. It absolutely isn't. It means that intensity is a variable the heart genuinely responds to, and adding a bit more pace to your walks, even incrementally, tends to amplify the benefit. Think of it as a dial, not an on-off switch. Every notch you can comfortably turn it up, over time and without injury, pays dividends. Some people find interval walking a useful tool here, alternating between a faster, more effortful pace and a slower recovery pace within the same walk. There's decent research suggesting this approach can deliver cardiovascular improvements efficiently, particularly for blood pressure control and aerobic capacity. It doesn't require a track or a timer or any equipment. It might look like walking briskly for 2 or 3 minutes, slowing down for a minute, then repeating. It adds variety to the walk, makes it feel less monotonous, and challenges the cardiovascular system with variability rather than a flat, unchanging effort. For people who find continuous moderate walking tedious, this can be a way to stay engaged while getting a stronger stimulus. For people who spend most of their day sitting, and that includes a significant portion of the population who work desk jobs, commute long distances, or simply spend evenings on a sofa, the relationship between sedentary time and heart risk is real and well documented. But there's an important nuance that gets lost in the sitting is the new smoking conversation. The problem isn't sitting itself, it's prolonged, unbroken sitting combined with an overall lifestyle that contains very little meaningful movement. Breaking up sedentary time with brief standing or moving breaks is genuinely helpful for metabolic markers, but it doesn't replace a structured walk any more than pacing around the kitchen replaces a real meal. The two strategies work together, not as substitutes for each other. Getting up every hour is a good habit. Having a consistent walking routine is a different and non-negotiable layer on top of it. For people beginning from zero, the most important thing to understand is that the gap between no exercise and some exercise is larger in terms of cardiovascular risk reduction than the gap between some exercise and a lot of exercise. The biggest jump in protection happens when you go from completely sedentary to consistently active, even at modest levels. This means you don't need to have a perfect routine to start seeing results. You need to start. 10 minutes today is a better foundation than a plan to do an hour next Monday that never materializes. The body responds to what you actually do, not what you intend to do. How do you know it's working if you can't directly observe your heart adapting? The body gives clear feedback if you're paying attention. You'll notice you can sustain the same walk with less effort than you could a few weeks ago. You'll find that after you stop walking, your heart rate returns to normal more quickly, a reliable marker of improving cardiovascular fitness. Climbing stairs that once left you slightly winded becomes noticeably easier. The heaviness at the end of a long day starts to lift. If you monitor blood pressure at home, you may see the readings trending in a better direction over weeks, particularly after walks. Sleep tends to improve, anxiety often decreases, mental clarity sharpens. These aren't side effects of better heart health, they are better heart health, showing up in ways you can actually feel. The final thing worth saying, and perhaps the most important, is this. The heart doesn't respond to your intentions, your knowledge, or how many health videos you've watched. It responds to movement, repeated consistently over time. Walking is one of the most elegant solutions humans have ever stumbled across for keeping the cardiovascular system healthy. It's free, it's low impact, it's accessible at almost any age or fitness level, and its benefits are backed by decades of serious research. The exact moment it starts helping your heart isn't a single minute on a clock. It's the cumulative result of showing up regularly, moving at a pace that challenges you without breaking you, and letting the body do what it's extraordinarily well designed to do: adapt, strengthen, and protect itself. Every walk you take that gets your heart working a little harder than rest is a deposit into an account you can't see but absolutely cannot afford to neglect.